Many thanks to you all for being here again. Before we get into it, it occurred to me there are two organizations we should thank, probably. One being the film's distributor, Kino Lorber. Should have mentioned them up top. And then we should really thank Indie Collect and Sandra Schulberg, without whom this gorgeous restoration would not have happened.
And Metropolis.
And Metropolis and the lab.
Together.
Yeah. All right. So anyone else? Okay. All right. So to start, I wanted to hear from all four of you actually about the genesis of the film coming out of this collective that you were all in San Francisco, and I just thought it might be nice to hear about sort of the birth of the film out of this other context. So.
Well, Rob and I were members of Cine Manifest, a film collective, a left-wing film collective in San Francisco back in the, we organized about 1971. And there were 6 of us who banded together to make low-budget independent features that were about people who didn't have a voice and that said something about what life was like in this country, past and present. And the project that I chose was a story that I'd heard from my grandfather when I was growing up as a kid in North Dakota. He was a small dirt farmer, and he was a member of the Nonpartisan League, which of course I'd never heard of because it wasn't taught in school. And so we each took a project that was dear to our heart, and this one was, this subject was mine. And Rob and I had known each other even before Cine Manifest, we're good pals. And he had roots in North Dakota, which Rob will tell you about. Well, he already told you about his grandfather, Fritjof. And so Rob and I banded together in the collective to develop and make this movie. That really was the genesis of the whole project.
Yeah, as you know, I mentioned my grandfather. And he was more than just a photographer and an inspiration in terms of his humanistic kind of view of life. He was certainly a shoulder to lean on for a young man, but also his values, although they were kind of slanted towards the Norwegian side, he sort of believed they were the chosen people of the earth. But basically, he was a man that never went to school, was totally self-taught. And he became the state photographer, and also he was the first filmmaker out there. So there's something about what happens when you're near the land and when you're down on the ground. Something that I think our politicians today, not too many of them have been down on the ground. I think I know one in particular who lives in New York here. And I doubt that he's ever had even any mud on his shoe. And when I see this film, when I sat there last night, I thought, this is exactly where the League was on the eve of that election. And we are facing the very same thing that they were facing. And you have to know that eventually corporate farmers won out. I'm not saying some of those guys weren't good guys and all of that, but here we have this band of grifters. And the Nonpartisan League was able to at least ward them off for a few years. So let's try to ward this son of a bitch off too, for good.
Back to our origins in making this film. I was very young, you could probably tell by looking at me. I had just graduated from college, so I was trying to figure out my life, right? So I didn't want to be a capitalist because my dad was a capitalist, forget that. I decided I wanted to be a worker. And I had lived in Sweden for about 6 months, which really helped with the dialogue in the film. Who knew, right? But I was riding the subway there all the time. And about 45% of the women there, of the drivers were women. And when I came back, the Bay Area Rapid Transit District was just getting started. They were hiring. So I called them up, I applied. as a train operator. They said, we don't hire women for that job. I said, oh, yeah? I may have some legal help behind me here. The next day, I was told I was put in the first class of off-the-street operators, 4 women and a bunch of other guys that weren't bus drivers, which is what everybody else was. And I became a BART driver. And almost at the same time, someone told me about this group called Cine Manifest that was doing film acting workshops. And I'd always acted. I always loved acting. So I went on over, and lo and behold, here is a place with like 5 gorgeous guys and 1 gorgeous woman. I mean, you can tell, right? It's been a while, but you can tell. It was gorgeous. I was young. It was fine, and I wanted to be an actress, so I helped them develop these the scripts that we were working on. And in BART, that didn't go so well. It wasn't a place for women because the harassment was awful. I ended up flipping out, got disability and workman's comp, took that money, and the 3 of us jumped into my little Saab. And John and I were in a relationship at that time. It's just a little side note. And and we went to North Dakota because being in the open spaces was going to be great for the claustrophobia I was suffering from being underground with those harassing people. And that's kind of my story. And then we just kept working. We kept working on it for a long time, and they'll tell you more about how that worked.
I was just a actor without a job who hang around the office all the time.
Sometimes that's all
Hill
it
Street
takes.
Blues, you get Mr. Hill Street Blues over here. He hasn't done anything since Northern Lights. Are you kidding me?
Well, one person who we didn't get a chance to talk about at length last night, but who I want to bring up now is the cinematographer,
Yes.
Judy Arola. John, in the talk that you and Rob did the other night with the directors of Union, but the 4 of you were talking about visual dimension of a film like this, and you were talking about the role of landscape in the film and working on how to render the landscape. So maybe maybe you and Rob could talk a little bit about your collaboration with Judy and sort of how you thought through the place of landscape in this film.
Well, since I grew up there, I lived under that big sky of the Northern Plains, my formative years. I also later was photographing it and continued that, really to this day. I have a book of photographs called Below the Sky, which is the landscape of the Northern Plains. And so I had a vision of how to show the images that really brought forth the power of the land, because I felt the landscape was a character in the film. And when Rob and I talked about working together on this film, under a great deal of pressure all the time, we decided that we would divide our duties, that I would really oversee the crew and setting up the shots and making sure that the images were what I wanted to get, and Rob would be at the same time working with the actors and rehearsing, and then we're shooting, and he and I would stand behind the camera and we'd consult and so on and so forth. And Judy had been an assistant camera person in the collective and had started shooting some documentaries on her own. She'd never shot a feature before. And so she and I worked together very closely. I always was right by the camera, and we were collaborating on what the image was going to be. I had a very strong formal kind of approach to how the film was going to be shot. It wasn't going to be shot documentary style. It was going to be shot really in the tradition of some of the the Russian films, neorealism, the films that we had been watching as well. So Judy brought her own talents to it, and we worked together as a team. And of course, we had a small crew, so we were all on the same page, and that's how we managed to do that. And I love the way film looks. I hope you do too. You know, it's just, and you rarely see that landscape. You know, at the same time, there was a movie called Days of Heaven that came out, Terry Malick's film. And Northern Lights was compared to that film often. That was in color, beautifully shot. What was this famous cinematographer? Days of Heaven?
Nestor Altman.
Nestor Altman. Oh, God, yes. A fantastic cinematographer. But when the films were compared as just films, Northern Lights often came out on top, which was wonderful for us, a little band of independent filmmakers up against, you know, a pretty big Hollywood film. Anyway, Rob.
Yeah, and just to carry the ball a little further, what I learned there out of Cine Manifest and the workshops that we did, and working with real farmers, many of whom had to learn lines, but of course there was improvisation in the middle. I realized that was going to be the foundation of the whole subsequent career of mine, working with the homeless people and everyday people in the San Francisco Tenderloin and around the world, workshops I've done in 5 or 6 different countries with young people, trying to come from the bottom up and try to teach people to respect themselves and to know that there's nothing in a great actor that's not there with them, and if you can find that, and I found ways to help them find it, you've got everything you need. So it was a great teacher for me. That experience that John and I and Joe and Susan had. And is there anyone else here that was there? I don't think so.
Well, I want to open it up to the audience in a second, make sure we give them a chance. But one more contributor who we didn't get a chance to talk about last night, who I want to bring up, is Ozzy Allers with the amazing music in the film. And I think before this, he'd played with like Van Morrison and Gene Clark of the Byrds, and he went on to be in the Jerry Garcia band, right? So what was that collaboration like?
I took piano lessons from Ozzy Allers. That's how I think it all started. And and nothing more than that. Ozzy was a great inspiration to me and to us, the music. And then Finbar Fury, that wonderful opening and closing music. Finbar Fury from there's a funny story, I hope he's not in the audience. When I heard that, David Chickley's house, that I said, that's the beginning of the Northern Lights theme. And so we tried to get hold of Finbar Fury, and he never responded. And to this day, we still have never responded, and he's a great, anyone knows anything about that music, don't tell him, or tell him now we're still trying to reach you. I think that'd be better. Yeah, music was wonderful.
You know, I just remembered something, what it was like in San Francisco at that time. You could walk into your place, which was one side of Market, and you could go on the other side, and you could go into what you call its place at the Colonel, at the what was it called? We did American Graffiti out of that office.
American Zoetrope.
American Zoetrope, yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola.
That was the kind of thing that was
Zoetrope.
happening there. Both sides of that kind of those different kinds of films being made, and we could go around. We could go in there. We could go in and talk to you guys. It was very different in Los Angeles.
Yeah, let's open it up to the audience. If you have a question, raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone. We'll start right there.
Thank you for the film. I've heard, I've known about this film for years. I'd never seen it. I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I lived for 3 years in Minneapolis before moving out here, and so I'd always wanted to see the film. So I'm glad I did. I just have one sort of like little a detail question, and this would be like for Joe. Like your character, like John and Ray, are brothers, right? But it seemed like you had a different accent than he had, and I was just wondering what
What's the deal?
what the deal was with that. But thanks for the film. Very much.
Yeah, no, that was because that's what I wanted to do. And nobody told me not to. I really wanted to make it as real as possible, and I knew I could do an accent that would, at least not embarrass myself. So I did, and they said, sure, go ahead. And I did. I don't know. Anybody have an idea of why those brothers were so different? Oh, well, let me ask you this question. Was I an older or a younger brother?
Younger.
So why does he have an accent?
Because, well, the older brother still had the old world in his, that's the back, I just made that up.
Good. That's what you're supposed to do.
Okay, he came over young, he came over and was only speaking the old country language, whereas you came in and people were speaking English around you. I don't know.
Good.
No, he took a sabbatical in Greece, I think.
Good
it was.
question.
Hi. Thank you so
Hold
much.
on.
Well, we'll see.
It'll work this time, I think. Yeah.
Something. Hi. Thank you so much. It's terrific to see it. I don't know even if, hopefully you remember. Do you remember the camera, how long you filmed, what you filmed, what film stock you filmed on? Just curious.
We shot in 16 millimeter, plus X, tri-X film. We shot with a lot of yellow and orange filters to increase the contrast between the sky and the clouds and the land. And we shot with an éclair camera with a zoom lens. I don't remember that we had any other. I don't think we had any other lenses. We had the zoom lens.
We have two cameras, though.
But we had another camera, an Airflex camera that I did second shooting on some of the time. And mostly we shot with one camera. But like in the threshing scene, we were shooting, Judy was in a van with the doors open with heaters blowing on either side of the camera, which is all wrapped up. And I was in my snowmobile suit with the area on my shoulder, staying out of her shot and in amongst the horses and the machinery, getting the close shots. And that camera had a wild motor on it, which means you could change the speed of it. And when you have it next to your head, you can hear the mechanism going around. And as it got colder and colder and colder, the camera started to go. And when it quit, that was it for me. Anyway, yeah, I was. And then we then Duart Lab here in New York blew the film up to 35 millimeter, and that's what we released it in 35 millimeter. So the first screening at the festival 45 years ago was a 35 millimeter print.
And how long did you shoot?
Oh, well, we shot maybe 6 or 8 different pieces over 2 years. Number of days, I can't tell you. We'd shoot and then we'd run out of money. We'd go back to San Francisco, raise some more money, and then come and do some more writing. Like with the threshing scene, that storm wasn't in the script. It just hit us. So we had to go back to San Francisco and do some rewriting, right, Rob?
So basically, it is a documentary.
My name is Jean Petrov, and I work with Rob Nilsson. And I want to say thank you a lot for all of the work what you do. And the phrase in the end of the film, I have time, I can wait, always will be with me. And if you want, you can share with the audience what we're up to now.
Yeah, just briefly, I don't want to be too much of a hawker, but this film was distributed by us over the course of 2 or 3 years. We could never get the industry interested in it. And I hate the word industry because art is not an industry. And if you think you're going to be an artist, you've got to forget about the industry and do what you want to do right to the hilt. And you try to overcome the resistance, basically, to to plain and honest and passionate work. So we are distributing. We got some cards over here. Hang them up. If at the end, if you're interested in our new Rob Nilsson Art Forms distribution thing for 45 feature films, 400 pieces of art, a couple of books, a few poems, there it is. That's it for me. Thank you.
I'll be in the back of the head.
All right.
Thank you all for beautiful film. And also thank you very much for being with us. I have two questions. One is, you said you wanted to do this movie, but the story was not taught at school and you didn't know. In the film, they talked about 40,000 farmers has joined at the League. And this would have been such a proud story for a whole family. And how those oral, the successions and others has not really gone to a larger scale, and this story was not really known. And secondly, after 6 years, the government seems to have changed. What were the reasons, or you think of? Is it there were kind of other developments which is kind of oppressing this movement, and which also for the story not known, was there any kind of controls or oppressions or forces coming against?
Absolutely. I mean, the Red Flame was a magazine that the people that were going to become the industrialized farmers and the whole Republican kind of point of view in America, they were hard at work right from the beginning, trying to find every possible way to tear down the fabric of all the socialist ideas, and they consider them communists, and they call themselves the Nonpartisan League because they couldn't organize under communism, or they couldn't organize under socialism. It had to be nonpartisan, and yet and many of them were not really fire-breathing radicals, but there was enormous. I don't know that, John, was there much violence at that time or not?
Well, later when they expanded to other states, they would tar and feather the League organizers in some places. But the opposition, the bankers, the grain people, the railroad, all the opposition they'd been against, formed something called, get this, the Independent Voters Association, right? And then they, not just the Red Flame, but they accused, remember this is 1916, during the Bolshevik Revolution. They were calling them Bolsheviks, they were calling them free lovers, they were calling them every name in the book. And the big newspapers in North Dakota were all controlled by them. And so all this stuff went out, and people believed it. They swallowed the lies, just like what's happening now. And then they ended up recalling the governor, the Nonpartisan League governor, Lynn J. Frazier, who you saw referred to in the movie, the first governor ever recalled in the United States. So they were up against it. But what was interesting is that in the 30s, it was revived by a kind of a wild guy. We called him Wild Bill Langer. He ended up being the senator from North Dakota, and he became the face of the reincarnation of the Nonpartisan League. So there was still a long progression of Nonpartisan League influence and populism that went up, through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And finally, they merged with the Democratic Party. In North Dakota, the Democratic Party is called the Democratic-NPL Party. In Minnesota, it's called the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which grew out of the Nonpartisan League. So there are still remnants. But to get 40,000 farmers, what they did is they took over the Republican Party, and they ran candidates who were Republicans, Democrats, and Socialists. And they all got elected. So it really was nonpartisan in that way. And the grassroots the genius of it is going farm to farm to farm, just like we showed in the film. That's how they got those 40,000 farmers. They did it on the ground. They didn't do it through newspapers. They didn't, of course, no TV or anything like in those days. It was person to person, just like that we tried to portray. And that was the genius of this whole movement, which we could use a hell of a lot more of right now.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there because there's another movie starting in a few minutes in this very room. But maybe we can talk outside a little bit. So
Thank you all for
yeah,
coming.
thank you all.
Great, thanks a lot.